Thank you so much for having us. We heard that this was the most lively and eager to participate group, so we're looking forward to kind of harnessing some of that. Oh, here we go. I can hear it already. So thank you again for that introduction. So my name is Britt, and this is my colleague Sasha Patterson, and we come to you from the YMCA of Southwestern Ontario. So our association has embarked on a remarkable journey over the past couple of years in support from the generous funding from the Lawson Foundation. And so we have we're working on a couple of research projects right now, all aimed at shifting and realigning adult perspectives in support of greater opportunities for children to engage in outdoor play. So we started within our association and now have the opportunity to take some training and curriculum and professional development that was developed through evidence-based practices all across Canada. So it's been a very, very exciting journey. Lots of reflection, lots of trial and error, lots of stories and narratives that have been shared kind of coast to coast that we are very excited to share just a snapshot of with you today. So again, thank you for having us. So before we begin today, I just want to acknowledge that all of our YMCA childcare centers are located on the ancestral and unceded territory of many Inuit, Métis, and First Nations communities. So part of our research and our work has gone beyond just the basic land acknowledgement. And we've really worked to partner with local Indigenous communities and families to bring that learning into our training and our understanding around land-based learning and land-based reconciliation. So some of the actions that we have taken, again, within the scope of our research are outlined on the slide. So investing in diverse materials, specifically from local or regional or provincial artists and authors. We've worked with local Indigenous communities to, again, learn from them and hear their stories, as well as, most importantly, partnering with the families and the communities in which each center works in. We know that centers, schools, programs do not exist in isolation, and so as visitors, it is our responsibility to partner and learn from, again, the voices, stories, and experiences of these communities. So we know that this is just basic first steps within the scope of our work, but we're very excited to continue this journey and continue to learn along this path. So today, as was mentioned in the lovely introduction, we're going to talk to you a little bit about our journey and some of the reflections that we've had over the scope of our time working to embed more intentional outdoor pedagogy within our childcare curriculum. So a couple of themes that we're going to focus on within this session is really looking at and embracing the child as truly capable, competent, curious, rich in potential within the context of an outdoor space, and looking at how we can acknowledge and give power to children as the capable, competent beings that they are in a way that brings their voices, participation, and decision-making visible. So we're going to talk a little bit about research, investigation, inquiry, all within an outdoor context. So I'm going to invite you for a moment to do a bit of reflection. And so I want you to think back to your childhood and think about your childhood. So what types of things did you like to do? And it doesn't have to be a cherished memory or a special standout moment in your childhood, but just think day to day, after school, on the weekends, over summer holiday. Sorry. What kind of things did you like to do when you were a child? So I invite you to take a moment or two and either self-reflect or chat with the people beside you about what memories pop into mind when I invite you to reflect on your childhood. We'll come back together in a moment or two. Okay, I'm going to invite you back. I knew this group was chatty. So, by a show of hands, how many of you, when I invited you to think about your childhood, thought about a memory or a series of memories or activities that occurred in an outdoor setting? So if that is true for you, hands up. Yeah, so just take a look around. All right, hands down. Next question. How many of you thought of memories that occurred, some type of activity or play that was, sorry, I need to stop roaming over this side, that involved an activity that was either self-led or initiated by you or peers, so free from adult direct instruction or rules. So if that was true for you, yeah, hands down. All right, last question. How many of your memories primarily consisted of activities or involvement with things like video games, movies, social media, for those of you that had social media at the time of your childhood, or any type of screen-based activity? So raise your hand if that's true for you. So a couple. So a big difference. And this has been very true of many of our experiences when Sasha and I do professional development or do talks in regards to getting adults to reflect on their childhood experience. Now, we don't have time to share everyone's experiences today, but I'm sure some of you shared examples of, playing with the neighborhood kids, or maybe you grew up on a farm, or having to come home when the streetlights came on. So lots of kind of experiences of true kind of free play, away from the direct instruction, direct rules of adults, and kind of gave you the cherished memories of being on your own in the community. And now when we first began our research and began this project, we asked the same question of children within our school age program, so in elementary school. And the responses were drastically different. So when we asked them, what are you going to do after school? When you go home? What did you do this weekend? What are you doing over the summer? We were seeing more and more responses being focused around that third question. I went home and played video games with my friends, or we binge watched this show, or I'm meeting up with friends online. And while obviously there's been an increase in technology use and access for a lot of these items, what we've noticed is that there's been a big difference and lack of balance between those types of activities and the true free unstructured play that many of us thought of when asked that question. And this is not to say that video games or technology or any of that is not beneficial. We know that there's pros to everything. We know that there's great benefits, especially post-pandemic, where a lot of us are connecting with each other online. And that was true for children as well over the past couple of years. And I should mention that this questionnaire was done pre-pandemic. But the issue that we're seeing is that children are no longer, spending majority of their free time, out at the parks, away with their peers, but spending more and more time either, in scheduled activities like swimming lessons or soccer lessons, or spending time with their friends online. So we want to acknowledge that, this is trending and becoming more popular because of access to and just the world that we live in today. We want to bring back those childhood experiences that we all had for children of today. And as early learning professionals, we work with children from infancy up into school age, and so we have truly a great responsibility to start showcasing how important engagement with the outdoors is, true free play, what it's like to feel bored sometimes, so that children grow up having experience with some of these activities. So just kind of to get you thinking and set the stage for some of our work. So I'm going to show you a brief video which just really highlights some of this generational trend that we are seeing. And as you're watching this video, I invite you to think to yourself, if this trend continues and we keep moving forward in the way that we have the past couple of years, what will the next future generation look like? If we were to ask children in 15 years, what do they do after school? How do they spend their free time? How might their answers differ? So we're going to watch this short video.
When you were a kid, what did you do for fun?
So we'd go blueberry picking, for instance.
That's so cute. But it was true.
We grew watermelons, plantains.
I found an old sign which was big enough for me to sit on. It made a great toboggan. It was very slick and very fast.
I had a few fish in my basket, and I looked up on this bluff, and here's this black bear sitting there watching me. If he starts chasing me, I'm going to keep throwing the fish out of my basket until he's gorged and he won't bother me.
And what did you like to do for fun?
You go door to door, get a group of kids, and you play lots of games, hide and seek, just going out to the field and playing baseball.
And we build these massive forts, the kind that you can actually sit in and play in, with our friends. And it was just really wonderful.
So what do you like to do for fun?
Video games, definitely.
I like to go on my phone,
text, some email.
My favorite thing to do in the world is definitely watching videos and playing video games. Those take up so much of my time.
3 hours or 3 to 4 hours a day. Same.
5 hours straight.
Just last week, I watched 23 episodes of a TV series in less than 4 days.
I forget. I'm in a house, I have parents, I have a sister, I have a dog, I just think I'm in the video game, I completely get lost. I would die if I don't have my tablet.
Whenever I feel upset, I'd play video games and I'd feel normal. It's really wonderful.
When your daughters grow up, your great-great-grandkids, what do you think will happen if this trend continues?
It's scary to think that they'll never have to leave the house.
Cindy grew up doing a lot of the things that I did and enjoyed, and I see what my grandsons are doing today, and it's mind-boggling.
By the time they have kids, it's going to be a really different environment.
I actually feel a little sad because I feel like he's missing out on what's out there in the beautiful world.
That special connection with nature, I think it's innate in all children, but needs to be nurtured.
So I had to start by hitting you right in the feels for this presentation. How many of you have been guilty of binge watching a show? I certainly have. So I love this video because it's very, again, representative of kind of the dilemma that we are in right now. And as I mentioned before, this is very much not an anti-technology talk. But when I binge watch a show, when my favorite show comes out and I sit on the couch all day and watch it, I feel guilty. And I think, okay, I gotta go out and do something productive, or I gotta take a walk, or step outside for a couple of minutes. And I know that because I know it's not healthy for me to be sitting on the couch glued to a screen for multiple hours. But the younger and younger children are being exposed to this type of lifestyle, this type of access, the less and less guilty or understanding that that's not healthy for their bodies they're going to have. So we want to, again, reconnect children and focus our attention on reintroducing them to the outdoors or re-engaging them with nature so that, getting to a certain level on a video game is just as natural as, being able to name the local tree in their backyard or in their neighborhood. So having that balance and again, connection to nature has been so important. So today we're seeing an alarmingly low percentage of Canadian youth and children meeting Canada's physical activity and sedentary behavior guidelines. And if children do not learn how to explore, experiment, test their limits, take healthy, safe risks, in a time where they have a supportive environment, encouraging adults, developmentally appropriate materials, then this will put them at a significant disadvantage when later in life, these supportive factors are not necessarily in place. And maybe some of those risks or challenges are a little bit more drastic than, learning how to walk or climbing a small tree. So we want to teach children from a young age all of these important life skills so that they're set up for success as they grow up. The science tells us that the early years sets the foundation, so this is a huge responsibility of us as educators to provide children with these opportunities to connect and engage in outdoor play. Time spent in nature is extremely beneficial for the mind, for the body, and for the spirit. Spending time in nature can help lower stress, lower anxiety, improve mental health, improve physical development. There's a whole range of benefits for just even, spending more time outdoors. And yet we know all of this, and outdoor play is still in jeopardy. More and more we're seeing children being kept inside or having recess limited due to things like weather or, changing factors. And when the fact is we need to be doing the opposite. We need to be doing more time outside. We need to be, having more intentional activities outside, taking advantage of the changing environments, because it's the perfect place for inquiry and development and learning without having to buy anything. When we treat outdoors as a space to blow off steam or use our outdoor voice or let out some energy, then it really becomes pigeonholed at a place that is not necessarily an integral place for healthy, holistic development. So at the YMCA of Southwestern Ontario, we've been working really hard to switch the mindset, and that goes for educators, for families, for community members, so that the outdoors are seen as a priority. When we have parents come for tours, we're taking them outside. When we have ministry or have licensing visits, we're spending a lot of time showcasing outside, because that is just as much of a priority as what happens inside the classroom. And this is in alignment with, all of the documentation that comes out from Ontario. Specifically, when we look at the child as capable, competent, curious, and rich in potential, this is a natural fit for what we want to see outdoors. And this is what we're going to spend some time talking about today, is how, if we believe that children are all of these concepts, then how are we showcasing this in our outdoor environment, and how are we making this visible? So if visitors, if parents, if anyone is entering our center, how do they know that outdoor play is a priority, and how do we know that children's participation in decision-making, as the capable beings that they are, is represented within our center and honored within our centers? So take this picture, for example, and I'm just going to move off the stage so I'm not blocking anyone. So when we think about how we value children's input, how we value children's participation, we have to think about things like our policies, our language, our procedures, our documentation, and how that language is set up to support, again, that image of children as capable and competent. So risky play, or risk in play, is a big topic of conversation that primarily comes from adults. And what we have worked to kind of reshift the focus in regards to our educators is that risk and risky play is not up for us to decide for a child. Risk is in the mind of a child, or the eyes of a child. It's not up for me to say to one child, this is risky for you, and this is not risky for you. It's about having a conversation with children, understanding what they're comfortable with, what's their limits, and talking through that with them so that they can decide for themselves what adventures and challenges they choose to partake in. So take this photo for example. So within the YMCA of Southwestern Ontario, we have primarily focused our environments on kind of being low level and filling them with loose parts so that children can build structures for themselves. It would never be up to an educator to go in and build a huge structure, because that would be making an assumption about each child's ability. So in this particular photo, a group of children built a bridge out of, as you can see, some tires and a plank for an activity. So this one particular child chose to move across this plank very slowly, very carefully. She used her arms for balance. She at one point asked for assistance, and that's how she chose to engage in that activity. Another child, as soon as they came outside, they ran down the stairs, ran across this, and were on to the next activity without a second thought. So I'm sure some of you can think, oh, yep, I have a child that would do exactly that. Not see any challenge or excitement in this activity at all. And then there's potentially a third child who looks at that and thinks, you know what, I think that's a little bit too much for me. I don't have interest in that, or that's not a challenge I'm willing to take today. And so they might choose to play somewhere else or simply observe the activity. And so these are the types of things that we want to honor when we work with children and when we think about, risk in play or risky play. is, again, it's in the eye of the beholder. So if children are building structures to their ability, then we have to honor that decision and talk through that process with them so that they can make those decisions. They can learn how to trust their gut. They can learn what it feels like to get the scary, funny feeling that's often described. And the same goes for research. So it is not up to us to tell a child what is worth researching and what is not. What is worth finding curious and what is not? What is worth investigating and what is not? And we want to use this language in our day-to-day work with young children to, again, empower them to use this for themselves. So this particular photo was sent home just in a parent communication without really an explanation. And when the parent came to pick up this child that's in this photo and said, "Oh, I saw you were jumping in puddles today, how fun." And in conversation with the educator said, "Well, actually, we had this magnificent science experiment today. They were jumping in the puddle to see how high the wave they could get the puddle to splash. They were trying from different heights, trying with different shoes, bare feet, rain boots, sneakers, all to see how they could get the biggest splash." And then the educator invited the child over to explain to the parent a little further about what had happened. So we've now gone from, how fun to jump in a puddle, to exploring concepts of depth, looking at gravity, balance potentially. So lots of kind of math and science principles, and a full learning experience based and rooted in inquiry and investigation that this parent wouldn't have known, and maybe this child wouldn't have been able to explain to its fullest if not given that opportunity. So we really want to, again, focus in on what children are researching, what are they seeing, what are they doing, and we'll talk a little bit later about the importance of making that visible. So what does seeing, wondering, and investigating look like in our centers? So we want to see and hear all types of questions like this. As children uncover things in the outdoor spaces, what does it sound like? What does it hear, or what does it taste like for infants to have? What do you see? What's changed? Our outdoor environments are incredibly unpredictable, which makes them fantastic locations for all kinds of inquiry and investigation. A storm could blow in different materials and different leaves from one day to the next. A squirrel family could move in to a local tree that could spark some interesting observation from one day to the next. So within the four walls of an indoor classroom, yes, we see different changes in materials and maybe classroom setup, but we don't have that unpredictable environment that is so great for questioning and bringing in the local community. And that's what makes outdoor spaces, even within a fence, so special in early learning. And we want to encourage children to begin questioning these things for themselves as well, and then hoping that they'll just embrace that into their daily life. They don't see something pass by of interest and just move on. They stop, they pause, they think, they research. And again, just becomes part of their daily ritual. So this quote is really important and reminds us, again, of our power and responsibility working with young children. So adults have the authority and the power over most decision making when it comes to children's opportunities for and access to outdoor learning. Even think about the way that we talk to children about weather. When it's a rainy day, we say, "Oh darn, it's a rainy day." And then children think, "Oh, I need to be disappointed because it's raining outside." And over time, that becomes ingrained in them. And it's the same for research. So again, we really want to be mindful of our language and our intention when working with young children, because we often have them more awake times during the day than they do at home during the week. And so we have an incredible opportunity to foster some lifelong appreciation for nature, environmental stewardship, and again, all types of benefits in regards to physical and mental health and well-being. So really, really important part of our already incredibly important work.
So we want to take a closer look at children participating as researchers within your environments. Children observe, experiment, explore naturally every day of their lives. Learning how to become reflective and critical thinkers is a skill that needs to be fostered at a young age, and it is our job and opportunity to help foster that with the children in our centers. Our centers and environments need to represent the lived experiences of the children within them and the communities that we find ourselves in. So we want to teach children to challenge their assumptions, but our program should be reflective of the children within them, and how better to accomplish this than to make sure that their voices are present. You'll see up on the screen different ways in which children and educators engage in research every day. Some examples include drawing, nonverbal cues from infants, or photographs taken by the children. To be successful in capturing these moments of research, we need to have a relationship with children as individuals, as well as understand the group dynamics within the centers that we are in. In programs designed for children, every aspect should involve children. This is especially important in research and data collection on their learning. So this ensures that when we speak for the children, our intention is to articulate the children's learning through their lens. So we'd like to take a moment and have you reflect at your tables. And we'd like you to answer the following question. Does your environment support children as researchers in risk-taking and discovery? So use the other questions on the screen to help facilitate this answer. So for example, we're now in the new season of fall. How does the season of fall help you articulate new ways of investigation, inquiry, and risk-taking in your outdoor environments? So we'd like you to take 5 minutes and discuss at your table, and I'm going to ask for a few volunteers to share their responses. Okay, let's come back together. If you're thinking about your outdoor environments at your sites, how are you supporting children as researchers in risk-taking and discovery? Would anybody like to volunteer? Absolutely. That's a wonderful example. So she said that they went for a walk and saw a puddle, and they experimented with rocks of different sizes to see the puddle, and they remembered the next time they went back. So if that was within your fence and you had the opportunity to recreate that experience, or to talk it through, or to add more things to that experience, buckets, things to talk about volume, and all kinds of great things to incorporate. Anybody else? Scavenger hunts? Great. Wonderful. So we had an example from another session today of one of the children hearing a bird. So they said, "What is that?" And the educator said, "It's a bird." And that led to opportunities of creating bird feeders, of researching birds, of talking about things and bringing things into their outdoor and indoor environments that led to more inquiry from a simple statement of what is that? Anybody else have any examples of how they're using their environments to support children? That's wonderful. It's wonderful. So it's our job as educators to scaffold and extend the learning that's happening based on what the children are interested in. If they say bird, if they see a puddle, how are we extending that in our outdoor environments, both inside and extending it outside? What are we adding and using to support their inquiry? So in order to support their research and their learning, we have to provide tools to capture it, correct? So here are some more of the common ones on on the screen. So we look for tools that help us wonder, investigate, inquire, and explore. Things like clipboards, journals, binoculars. There's some great cameras that you can get that are child-friendly so they won't break if they drop them. And you can get some really great information from that. So what do the children need in your centers to create opportunities for inquiry? What can you add to your sites to really help them and to support them in their investigations? So on the screen we have some examples. This is an invitation that was put out at one of our sites. So we use this as the seasons changed, and we're talking about some really great opportunities for learning in this simple invitation. So incorporating invitations into your outdoor environments helps facilitate children as researchers and investigators because they will ask you questions about this. And we can support them in their learning by continuing the conversation past this simple activity. These photos are sensory experiences, natural materials, and invitations that support their interests from indoors to outdoors and vice versa. And here you see an example of making learning visible. We're incorporating children's voices as they add collections of artifacts made available by a prompt from their educator. So their educator simply had to set this up and ask them to find the artifacts that spoke to them. So again, I'd like you to take a look at this photo on the screen. If you were an educator at this site and you saw this moment of time happening, what would you add to the space to allow children's voices to be visible and their research? So what could you add to this opportunity? Right, great. So things for science, bug collection, magnifying glasses.
What about like for preschool, like little hammers?
Yeah, hammers for preschoolers. Yeah, that's wonderful. They make child-size hammers that are fantastic. Yep, balls. Yep. Absolutely, using paintbrushes and some art materials, absolutely. So I also like to incorporate STEAM principles. I always say STEAM instead of STEM because I like including art. But I would suggest things like a tape measure to see how high they're jumping. So you're bringing in math to the outdoor environments based on a simple observation. So reflecting back on what we talked about at the beginning of the session, everything that we do with children should include them. So there's a difference between research of children, research with children, and research from children. This is the same for documentation. Consider for a moment, is the documentation that you produce on a regular basis of children done with children, or does it come from the children? Perhaps it's all of the above, but how do you bring visibility to children's participation in documentation? So think about your own documentation, maybe that you created this week or last week. Who's it for? Is it for you, your supervisor, the families? If it's for the children, is it at a developmentally appropriate level for them to engage with? Or is it posted high up where only the adults can engage with it? Who provided the photos for it? Are there any artifacts that they chose? Where are the stories or the themes coming from? So all of these things should incorporate the children's voices so that they can also engage with it.
So looking carefully at what has captured children's interest and inquiry and attention is really the first step in designing curriculum and documentation, as Sasha mentioned, that is reflective of their current and ongoing interests. Documentation is a great tool for, what is known as visible listening, and many of us probably are documenting on a regular basis. And when we started this project, we found that, similar to what Sasha was saying, 99% of our documentation was reflective of indoor learning and was placed on tall bulletin boards or even in hallways, and often reflected experiences that had happened in the past or a week ago, and not necessarily relevant of current interests or things that were happening on an ongoing basis. So we've been working over the past couple of years, and again, this has been a journey. This did not happen for us overnight. It's been a very long journey with lots of learnings and trial and error. But we've been working to bring documentation back outside and having it posted in the place that is most meaningful for children, so at the place and the space in which it happened. And we've also started moving to a concept of co-constructing documentation with children in a way that is pedagogical. So documentation, typically in some cases, and again, we can only speak from experience, but was more so treated as kind of a one-stop snapshot experience, and then it was, it moved on. Sometimes you have 2 documentations to create a series or a couple, but it wasn't seen as kind of an interactive or reflective process that involved the children. So in order to make it pedagogical, we need to have ongoing interpretation, analysis, and reflection from others, and specifically from children. So like Sasha said, involving children from the onset of the creation and selecting the photos, telling the story, having the quotes, and then again contributing to the living and breathing document as the experience continues. And this type of documentation process really gives children ownership and leadership over their own learning experiences. They become presenters or storytellers of their own learning, especially when they have artifacts and photos to help remind them of previous learned experiences. So on the slide, we just have a couple of examples of different ways that we have showcased artifacts and documentation within our centers. And when we talk about co-constructing, we talk a lot about having conversations with children, but we know that involving infants and toddlers or those that don't have the language yet is just as important. So for anyone who works with infants and toddlers, you know how to engage those children and you know how to get participation from them. Whether it's joint attention or prolonged observation, or whether they're taking one of these photos and holding it with them, marching it around the yard. We often have toddlers taking photos off from the places in which we post them and wandering around. And again, having items like sandwich boards that can be movable, because it's the most meaningful for them when they see it in the place that it happened. It's a great way to interact with families as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this particular experience is kind of one series of kind of start to finish in regards to documentation. So the first picture here, we see an invitation or a provocation set out by the educator. So the interest was gardening and flowers, so they set out some materials. The second picture, we see a couple of children interacting with these materials, and they decided to turn it into a flower bake shop. So they're making mud pies and mud cupcakes and using the flowers as decoration. And it became a really great experience for this handful of children. So the educator took some photos, took some observations, gave a Polaroid camera to the children. The center is fortunate enough to have a Polaroid for the children to use. And then the next day, following the experience, posted some of those pictures, both that the educator took and that the children took, in order for the children to interact with it. And so on the screen, and there's a couple copies on each table, we weren't able to print one for everyone, but the educator created a documentation and an ongoing interactive, co-constructive documentation out of this experience. So in the first box, they added the observations, so what they took, including the voices and the language of the children. And then the next day, they invited the children to participate in this documentation. So when the children came out and saw those photos, they all rushed and wanted to explore and look at the photos. If anyone who works with children, you know that they just love looking at photos of themselves. So it wasn't a hard sell to try to convince them to check out the photos that they had posted. And so with prompting and support from the educator, they were able to have some conversations. Oh, what do you see happening in the photos? What happened here? What questions can we ask of the children that are involved in this group? And again, documenting this throughout the entire session. So, encouraging educators to have small notebooks to document some of this. And then finally, the educator of the original group invited the initial children that had participated in this experience and asked them to take that leadership role and talk to the other children who were asking these questions about the experience and what they had done with the materials. So again, giving them that opportunity to explain their own learning and explain their own inquiry. So this is just one way that we have kind of explored pedagogical documentation and co-constructing of documentation within some of our centers. With documentation, there's no set template or right, official way to do it. This has just really worked for us and helped to, again, bring out those voices and participation of children. So we're gonna give you a couple of minutes and we're gonna try this out for ourselves. So on your tables, you have a blank documentation form and a series of photos. There's actually 3 different series of photos, but feel free to just pick one, whichever one you like best. And in your table groups, you can do it as a whole or in pairs or groups. I'd like you to pretend you are the educator in this scenario, viewing and taking these photos, and I want you to write down some sample observations. So naturally, you have to have fun with it, be creative, make up some dialogue, but take the next couple of minutes and just focus on filling out some observations in that first box. So I see that a couple of us some are still writing some observations, some are still looking at some photos. So if you are done your observations, then I invite you to switch your mindset and spend the next couple of minutes filling out the next 2 boxes. So from the eyes of the child. So I wonder, questions we have. So again, take off your educator hat, put on your child hat, whatever age group you work with, and fill out the next 2 boxes. If you're still working on the observations, that's okay. We're gonna wrap this up in a couple of minutes. So I know that this activity was a very shortened version of hopefully what could be some really great discussion and reflection. I just want to remind you that, again, we have been on this journey for a number of years. And so we're just kind of getting to the place where we're bringing documentation and visibility into our outdoor spaces. It's certainly not something that happens overnight. And this is just one example of what that could look like. There are hundreds and hundreds of ways that you can represent learning, that you can invite children into the conversation and co-construct documentation with them and make their voices visible. One common question that we do just get on this is the difference between the I see, I wonder versus the questions we have. And the I see, I wonder box is really focused on getting children to kind of question the pictures and the experiences at face value. So what are they thinking when they see those photos? Whereas the questions we have is thinking towards the future. What might we like to ask the children involved in this, where they're gonna take it next, or what can we bring back to them? Whereas again, the I see and I wonder is more so observations and personal reflection coming from the children. So hopefully this experience was a little bit eye-opening if you're not currently doing documentation in this way or co-constructing documentation with children, just about an idea about how that could look or how that could unfold. Again, keeping the child and the child's voice at the forefront.
So as we said earlier, it's very important to bring families into the conversation. So your documentation in the outdoors is a great opportunity to bring parents and caregivers into the conversation. So posting that documentation outdoors, you have the opportunity for parents to question the value and for you to tell them about the skills that their children are learning and developing when they're in the outdoors environment. So it's another great way of involving parents in the conversation when you're in the outdoors. When parents are viewed as welcome partners in their child's early learning experiences, they're able to bring their own ideas, abilities, knowledge, and experience to the table, thereby enriching the experience for the children, the educators, and the families. So it's really important that we engage parents in those conversations. But we want to be mindful about the language that we use. So if you take a look at the two examples on the screen, there's two different quotes about the same experience that Eric was having. So the first one, Eric was climbing and jumped off of something. If you're going to tell a parent that, I hope that you have some conversation to back that up. If you were looking at these two quotes, which one would you think would talk to the skills and experience that child is learning? One or two? Two. So it's really important that the language we use, especially when you're involving parents or if they're new to either risk-taking or outdoor experiences, some parents are not comfortable, right? And we have to mitigate that by making sure that when we are explaining things that their children are participating in the outdoors, that we frame it in a positive light, that we show the skills and the challenges that those children are having, and really speak to the importance of why we're doing what we're doing. So we just want to say in summary to remember that research is natural for children. It can be found in the ordinary, everyday experience of squishing in the mud, jumping in a puddle, listening to the wind through the trees. It's up to the educators to make sure that you're asking the right questions, pointing out those things, and making sure that children have the opportunity to inquire and further their learning. If anybody has any questions after our session today, our emails are on the screen, as well as our YMCA website that is strictly focused on outdoor play. So we have that website that's available. It has resources, professional development opportunities, as well as some research on that site. So if you have anything that you'd like to pull from there, please feel free to look into it.